Okay.
So we went through activity 1, we finalized that. Next slide. And next slide. I'm going to go over that later on. Okay, so our objective detail, there's a couple open things to kind of think about. We talked about it before as far as why was the objective. We already talked about that a little bit in detail. We kind of, the admin team got together and collaborated before. During an admin meeting throughout in the morning, and we also got together later in the day to kind of finish up just with constructing the first parts of the PD around the objective. How was it measurable? We discussed that, and we discussed the last portion also. Next slide. All right, so this is where I'm kind of getting into how are we going to go and create the objectives? How are we going to go and create a learning outcome? Actually, learning outcomes are later on. That's all our warm-ups. But it says transform standards for students. So as Mr. Sims clearly stated earlier, is that standards help to drive an objective to be created. Okay? So really that's kind of giving you an overarching theme of the objective, but standards help to write the objective. It helps students identify what is important, and it helps to differentiate the knowledge. So objectives aren't always going to stay the same. Sometimes you have an objective and you think you're ready to go for the class, but then you look at some data in the past classes and you say, you know what? My kids just didn't get this. You know, my students just didn't understand this portion. So sometimes you have to actually differentiate or change the objective. A standard can't change. You can't change the wording of a standard. The standard is what it is. But when you have an objective, and sometimes you don't reach that prior class, you don't reach a certain concept, you can hybrid that with what you want to get across that day, plus a prior understanding. There we go. Plus a prior understanding. So sometimes the objective can actually change a little bit based off of looking at data and analyzing things of what you want to get across. So that's why it really isn't a standard. The standards you can't change. Objectives, sometimes you can. Next slide. So this shouldn't be foreign to us. Objectives. We use the lab's depth of knowledge in our school. We're not using Bloom's, we're using web's depth of knowledge. And they have keywords that are posted all over the place. They have level 1, level 2, 3, and 4. Different ways to kind of add different words in and create different types of thinking. So, one says extended thinking. So, design a new chairlift for a population of 100 that needs to be handicap accessible for people in wheelchairs for a certain reason. You know, it's that extended thinking sometimes. So those are the buzzwords, the keywords, kind of incorporate within your objectives too, and it gives you a whole plethora of words to start things with, to incorporate. You could even do different levels of thinking too. So you can recall information, because remember, like I said before, with objectives, it can change a little bit. So if you can change an objective, what I'm really talking about is that could be a little bit of a recalling piece, but then after the objective, you're trying to reach another larger goal too. So recalling from prior understanding, from prior class, and then also reaching something more at the end of that current class too. So prior with the current. Next slide. So expectations. Objectives drive learning activities and assessment. Assessment objectives may be included in every single lesson. So again, objectives can be in every single lesson along the way. They should be in every single lesson along the way too. And sometimes they can be revisited from prior classes. Okay? Most posted daily for students and observers. Students will. Be sure not to confuse activity with learning outcomes. Okay? I'm going to talk about that a little bit too. Objectives. The biggest thing to really remember is the objectives should be measurable, rigorous, and doable. Okay? So the bold and major focus is always measurable. If your objective isn't measurable, then you're going to either get a proficient or a basic, at least for those two. If it's just measurable, pushing to the proficient and distinguish each time, we're going to get to that in a second. SMART objectives. How to reach that proficient distinguished level. So we should all know what SMART goals are. We're kind of speaking of SMART goals, SMART objectives. We're actually going to SMART objectives. So, writing SMART objectives. An objective is derived from a goal, has the same intention as a goal, but is more specific, quantifiable, and verifiable than the goal. So, long story short, measurable. It's you can actually change. You can change the objective a little bit too. That's why it says Well, it's also verifiable. It's also more of a variable too. It can also be changed sometimes for future lessons. You want a different objective each time too. A goal can sometimes be set into curriculum, or many curricula or standard can be set into there. Next slide. What does SMART stand for? It's listed up there. We're going to get to it in a little bit. Next slide. Running SMART objectives. Don't try to rewire everything around. Just try to follow that SMART goal. That's why it has an acronym kind of go in the best way suitable for running that objective. Slide. Running SMART objectives. Measurable is the most important. We already talked about that. And it's just making sure that it's able to be attained a certain way. It needs to be rigorous enough, just rigorous enough, where your students should be able to obtain that objective. Measurable. Examples. So the biggest thing about this is we can go and get PDs and talk about it all the time, but if we're not delivering something to you, you're not going to know what to put. So I can give you the examples in my lesson plans, also give you examples here. Measurable. Just answer the phone quickly. Now, that's why we see a lot of basic ineffectives over there, is because they're not really measurable. Phone calls will get answered in the next 3 rings. Basic proficient right there. So you're changing it a little bit and adding that measure to it afterwards. So it's a small little tweak to the objective. Summary is something measurable to access progress towards the objective. So, open-ended question. Is there something measurable to assess progress towards the objective? Anyway.
Could you reword that question?
Yes. So it says, is there something measurable? How would you measure success along the way to reach your objective? How would you measure that success during the lesson?
Questions. Just questions. Questions are there.
Well, along the way, since you're saying along the way, I'm basically not doing a lot of, not any kind of written assessments, but observation assessments, because if I'm doing mainly drawing software, let's say, then I'm walking the room to kind of assess what students are able to, move to the next level, what students aren't moving to the next level. So that's kind of my measure, how I measure.
All based on the activity that you're doing.
Yeah.
Based on the activity you're doing, exactly.
Based on the rubric that you made, that you had.
I gotta get the food off the festival.
Another example right here too, and that'll be there for you to kind of utilize as well, as far as it being measurable. So it meets these every other month during the school year. So it's another way to kind of measure it. Now, first, the one we'll talk about is achievable. It says achievable is linked to measurable. Okay? So are your students going to obtain it? How do you know if it's achievable? You know it's measurable. It says others have done it successfully. So if I used to teach former engineering courses, I'm only speaking to the best that I know. So if I taught former engineering courses and I know that another teacher got to a certain objective in that class, I know they're able to do it. So not only do I know they're able to do it, I want to modify it to fit my classroom. So I know it's achievable because somebody else has done it before. That's what the achievable point is really getting to or getting across. Is, has somebody else done it before? Okay, I know I can do that too now. That's achievable. Okay. Next one we'll talk about is relevance. So this means 2 things. That the goal or target being set is something that can actually impact upon or change. But this is really talking about relevance. So a lot of times you walk into classrooms and the objective really isn't relevant towards what is actually being taught in class. Quite honestly and frankly, when we go into some classrooms and we see objectives that have nothing to do with the lesson being delivered. It was for a different class, it hasn't changed, or sometimes you're teaching a different content, a different class. So I may walk into class that's supposed to talk about how to draw a triangle, and they're talking about how to draw a square. You can make some relevance in that point, but the fact is that sometimes it's, and they talk about it, they point the objective, but the objective up there is still the wrong one. So to me, it doesn't make any sense. So there's no relevance. So just because you read the objective and it might be on there, you may know where you want your kids to go in class. If you start teaching something different, the kid look at the board and they don't know what's going on anymore. Because kids drawn out. They fall asleep, they put their heads down, they get distracted. That's something, things that happen sometimes. So with that being said, You want to make sure it's relevant to what's being taught, it's current, it's up to date, it'll engage the kids more readily. So that's why I do like Nearpod, because when I give my presentations, I can make it relevant, just because I like to be on technology sometimes, not all the time. But I like to be on that and actually do a quick little response answer as opposed to writing stuff down, they know how to type it. But I also have written ones too. So I can have written attendance, I can do electronic via portal, and I can also have it on Nearpod also. So, and it also establishes that respect and rapport too when you do different things. Like when they put in attendance and put a funny name, they still put their real name afterwards. You gotta laugh about it. So, little tip too. Next. Thanks, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Realistic. So it's just talking about is it going to be reached? Can it be reached? Have we seen it before? Is it measurable? Is it realistic of what you're expecting of the students? Is it so far up there that your kids can't reach it? Or is it realistic because you know it reaches your students? Don't set an objective so high that your students can't reach something. Because if you do that, it means the lesson has failed. And when the lesson fails, you don't reach a standard, that's when test scores go. Specific. You will know your objective is specific enough if, and it kind of goes through a lot of process to detail whether it's specific or not. Is it specific towards what you want to get across? Is your lesson being taught or delivered specifically geared towards the kids and the individual needs of your class? If you have students that have 4 to 5 to 6 ESOL and 2 IEPs and about 20 students that are not identified as such, you're still a large population. Is it specific toward those needs of the students as well? Classes should be, each objective should be attainable and achievable by all students. This gets a little bit crazy. It says specific. Who is going to do how much of what by when? So it says by June 1st, 2007. By the way, this is like by when. This is a pretty cool way to look at an objective, by the way. If you don't get anything out of this presentation, you get one thing, it's just following this slide. Because it says exactly what we're kind of looking for on how to write your objectives each time. Who is going to do it, how much of what, and by when? Well, by when is by June 1st, 2007. So by that certain date, I want them to know something else. The HKLB Institute participants, that is the who. And then it says, we'll have established the local school, so on and so forth. That's of what? How much of? That means at least every other month during the school year. So if you didn't understand anything today, as far as the presentation, that right there can be the key to success of writing that practical objective. It talks about all the components in between. Who, the what, the how, the when. All that objective. Here's some curriculum samples, so at your own leisure, come up with examples of different standards. Next. More samples. And it says how do you measure this? Refers to activity, not outcome. Again, things you can use for reference for future use. Next. And it says rewrite the objectives. So it goes from incorrect to correct. So prior to concluding for today, it says students will analyze current issues and ecosystems and be introduced to key vocabulary in order to complete the concept. Matt? Now, that's a little bit incorrect, and a really quick way to reword that. Students will analyze man-made issues and ecosystems in an essay. Students will distinguish between man-made and natural issues that impact ecosystems on a concept map. So you're kind of talking about what they're doing within that concept map. And I think the science teacher can speak more to that than I can, specifically. But they were taking from the PGCPS, yes.
So you say it's not an outcome?
You're not looking for an outcome, no.
Okay, so like in my curriculum,
Can you pause the recording? Recording, please, in the bottom left. Thank you. And next slide. Additional samples, again, just additional samples for you to use. And again, it's the concept map to kind of restate this. The importance of utilizing these words within your objectives. It'll make them writing easier. And using what we did earlier, the color code, the who, the what, the when, the why. So when it shows those certain the who, what, when, why type of thing in there, use that to gauge your objectives and use these words if you don't know how to craft it a certain way. It's critically analyzing, research this, or you want to hear even level 1 says repeat, recall, recite, revise, apprise, appraise, so on and so forth. Use those key buzzwords within there to craft your objectives. And again, just kind of laid out for you if you have a hard time reading the concept maps. And we'll pause. Okay, we'll break that up.